The street was almost too quiet for early evening. A strip of antique street lamps and shuttered cafes. Rainwater still glistening between cobblestones. Leo had cut through here on a whim, walking off the stale energy of the office. He told himself it was just a shortcut to the metro. He noticed her before she noticed him. A woman at the edge of the curb, one hand adjusting the belt of a long cream-colored coat, the other holding a slim leather clutch. Her hair caught the breeze in loose waves, and for a second it looked like one of those perfume ads. Effortless, rehearsed yet somehow real. She smelled faintly of something warm and floral, carried to him in the cool air before he was close enough to speak. She turned as he approached, polite smile already in place. "Excuse me," she said, her voice low but precise. "Do you know if Rue Montclair runs straight to the station?" "Yeah," he said quickly, pushing his hands into his jacket pockets to steady them. "2 blocks down, left at the old cinema. Can't miss it." He hadn't planned to sound so sure. He just wanted to be helpful, or maybe noticed. "Thank you." She shifted her clutch, eyes flicking up and down the street, as if calculating how long it would take. She was older, clearly, but the kind of older that draws you in rather than pushes you away. She seemed to stand in her own light. He hesitated. "Are you visiting?" The question tumbled out softer than he meant. She half smiled. "Working late. Lost my driver. Or maybe he lost me." A small self-aware laugh. It didn't reach her eyes. Leo nodded, and for a moment they just shared the damp air between them. She stepped forward to pass, and he instinctively moved to the side. Their hands brushed, her fingers gloved, his bare, an accidental touch that sparked like static. She drew in a subtle breath, but didn't pull away immediately. "Sorry," he murmured. "Don't be." She adjusted her scarf with slow, deliberate fingers, like buying herself a pause. "You're sure it's left at the cinema?" "Positive," he said. He wanted to offer to walk her there, but didn't. The words crowded behind his teeth. Another silence. He noticed the small crease between her brows, the faint glint of tiredness beneath her mascara. Something in her posture told him she was used to being seen but not approached. "Well," she tilted her head, ending the pause. "Thank you for rescuing me from my own sense of direction." He gave a small shrug. "Anytime." He was smiling without meaning to. She began walking, heels clicking lightly on the wet stones. He stayed rooted to the spot, watching her coat sway, the perfume lingering faintly after she passed. Just before the corner, she glanced back once, quick, unreadable, and then turned into a small boutique with black and gold lettering. The door closed softly behind her, leaving only her reflection in the window for a heartbeat. Leo realized his pulse had jumped, as if he'd run. He told himself it was nothing, just a stranger asking directions. Still, he stayed there longer than he should, rain spotting his shoulders, staring at the boutique's door. He wondered what she was buying, who she was meeting, why it felt like he'd stepped into someone else's story. And then the thought he couldn't shake. Maybe he didn't want to step back out. Her apartment was warmer than he expected. Not just the heat, the lighting. Pools of amber spilling from low lamps. A faint trace of her perfume threading through the air, even though she'd left her coat on a chair. The place had that curated elegance that doesn't quite hide how much time someone spends working. Neat stacks of papers on the marble island. Unopened mail beside a glass of wine. He had come because she'd said she needed an extra pair of hands to sort contracts. A harmless favor, that's all. But standing there now, jacket off, sleeves pushed to his elbows, Leo felt the air between them shift. She moved with quiet efficiency, gathering papers, tapping the edges. "Straight. I always think I'll do this on weekends," she said, half smiling. "But weekends have a way of escaping me." He laughed softly. "You and everyone else." She glanced at him, the corners of her eyes softening for a second. "You're quicker at this than my assistant." A pause, then lower. "Not that I should be saying that." He caught the hesitation, the way she sipped her wine to fill the silence. He noticed everything tonight, the small tremor in her sigh, how she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking. He was sure she could feel him noticing, too. They reached for the same folder at once. Her fingers brushed the back of his hand, light as silk. She didn't move away immediately. "Sorry," she murmured, though she didn't look sorry. She looked somewhere else entirely, as if thinking herself into or out of something. Leo swallowed. "No problem." His voice sounded different to his own ears. Lower, unsteady. The city noise below faded into a hush. He stacked the last of the papers, aligning them carefully just to have something to do with his hands. She leaned against the counter now, glass in one hand, watching him with an expression that flickered between amusement and something heavier. "You don't have to do all of it," she said quietly. "I know you have a life after hours." He set the papers aside. "It's fine. I don't mind." Her smile came slower this time. "You notice everything, don't you?" she said. Not really a question. He met her eyes, but didn't answer. She tilted her head slightly, as if weighing a decision, then reached out and straightened the edge of his collar. A small, almost maternal gesture that felt anything but. He exhaled. The room felt smaller. She set her glass down, the sound soft on marble. "You don't have to go yet," she said, voice low but clear. "Stay a little longer." Rain hissed softly against the tall windows, a steady sound that blurred the city outside. The apartment smelled of roasted beans and damp pavement because Leo had come straight from the corner cafe, 2 cups warming his hands like an excuse. She opened the door barefoot, hair loosely pinned, a silk blouse falling open at the collar. "You didn't have to," she said, eyes flicking to the cups. But she took one anyway. "You always remember how I take it." He shrugged, stepping in, trying not to drip on the parquet. Seemed like a night for coffee. Inside, the lamps glowed low, throwing amber across the walls. She crossed to the window, frowning at the street below, and pulled the curtains slightly to one side. He followed her with his eyes, not moving closer, just tracing the outline of her against the light. "I've been buried in work all day," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Feels like I'm watching the weather from a hotel." She gave a soft laugh, but it came out thin. Leo set the cups down on the counter. "You should get out," he said, then hesitated. "We should," but he didn't finish. She reached for the curtain again, and when he stepped forward to hand her the coffee, their fingers met. A warm jolt, like touching a live wire in the dark. Neither of them moved at first. She looked up at him, startled but not entirely. The rain ticked louder. "Sorry," he said, though his voice didn't sound sorry. Her lips parted, a breath, but no words. She let the curtain fall back into place and took the cup from his hand. "Thank you," she whispered, still not looking at him. A phone buzzed on the sideboard, a sharp, insistent sound. She glanced at the screen, a flicker of something passing across her face, a name he couldn't see. She silenced it with one thumb, then set it face down. "It's nothing," she said quickly, too quickly. He nodded, unsure if he should ask. Instead, he took a sip of his own coffee, scalding his tongue. The interruption left a hollow space between them, like a door left ajar. She walked back toward the table, trying for casual, but her hand shook slightly as she set down her cup. "You're soaked again," she said. "You'll catch something." He laughed once, short. "Guess I didn't plan ahead." Silence stretched. The rain drummed. He stood near the doorway, not moving, coffee still warm in his palm. She was turned away, pretending to sort papers she'd already sorted, shoulders taut. He should leave. He knew he should. But his feet stayed planted. The air smelled of rain and her perfume and something else he couldn't name. For a long moment, he simply lingered there, watching the back of her hand tremble as she reached for a pen, wondering if leaving was still an option at all. The lamps were turned even lower tonight, their glow reduced to small circles on the parquet. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the windows streaked and dark like a mirror. The apartment felt suspended, no traffic noise, no clock ticking loud enough to remind them of the hour. She sat on the couch with her knees angled toward him, bare feet tucked under a long skirt. A glass of water, not wine, in her hand. Leo sat opposite in an armchair, trying to look comfortable, his jacket folded neatly over the armrest, as if that would keep him from bolting. She had been telling a story about her first job, some high-stakes pitch gone wrong, a boss who'd humiliated her. He'd expected the anecdote to end in a polished punchline, but instead her voice had gone quieter. "I still have that dream sometimes," she said, staring at the rim of her glass. "Standing there in front of everyone, knowing I've lost the room. Feeling small. Invisible." She gave a thin smile, eyes fixed on some point past him. "You'd think at my age I'd be over it." Leo shifted forward, elbows on his knees. "You don't seem invisible." It came out rougher than he meant, like a confession disguised as reassurance. Her eyes flicked to his, startled by the intensity. For a heartbeat, she held his gaze, then looked down, twisting the glass slowly between her palms. Sometimes it's easier to look like you're not afraid, she said softly. Doesn't mean you aren't. He wanted to reach out, to place a hand over hers, but instead he pressed his palms together, thumbs against his lips. He began, then stopped. The words lined up in his head. I think about you when I shouldn't. I don't know how to stop. But he swallowed them. She noticed the hesitation. Her fingers tightened on the glass. What? She asked, almost a whisper. Nothing, he said quickly. Just nothing. His knee bounced, betraying him. Her mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. She leaned back into the cushions, exhaling through her nose. You're a terrible liar, she murmured. He laughed once, nervous, and rubbed the back of his neck. I know. Another silence. She set her glass down on the table with deliberate care, then drew the throw blanket closer around her shoulders. He watched the movement, watched her hands disappear under the fabric. Their eyes met again, a slow lock that neither of them broke this time. Every shift of her body, every brush of her fingers along the blanket's edge, felt charged. He could feel the heat of her across the space between them, like standing near a fire without stepping into it. The room held its breath. No clock, no rain, only their two uneven rhythms. The air was so dense with what they weren't saying that Leo almost thought he heard it hum. He stayed perfectly still, hands gripping his knees, while the silence between them grew heavy enough to cut. He'd been looking for a pen on her sideboard when he found it. A small framed photo tucked behind a stack of books. Not displayed, almost hidden. The glass was a little dusty. In it she looked younger, maybe his age now, leaning against a seaside railing with her hair blown straight back, eyes squinting at the sun. There was a man beside her, half cropped out, arm around her shoulders. Leo's thumb hovered over the edge of the frame. He wasn't sure if he should put it back before she saw, but she was already standing in the doorway, watching him. You found it, she said quietly. No accusation, just resignation. He straightened, setting the frame back exactly as he'd found it. I'm sorry, I wasn't snooping. Her arms crossed loosely, the way someone holds themselves against a chill. It's all right. I never really hide it. Just don't like to look at it. She moved closer, eyes fixed on the photo. That was a long time ago. He caught the shift in her voice, a softness under the poise. He was important to you? He asked, then winced at his own intrusion. She gave a small, brittle laugh. Important enough to break me for a while. Her gaze stayed on the picture. We thought we were untouchable. We weren't. A pause, and then even quieter. I haven't let anyone that close since. Leo felt something in his chest tighten. He wanted to touch her shoulder, but didn't. His hands stayed at his sides. You still look happy, he said, and hated how clumsy it sounded. She looked up at him finally, eyes glinting with something between warning and plea. Happiness can be a snapshot, she said. Doesn't mean it lasted. He swallowed. The room felt smaller again, heavy with a history he hadn't known until now. Without thinking, he stepped a fraction closer. I don't want to lose what's here, he whispered. Her breath caught. What is here? She asked, but it wasn't a challenge. It was trembling curiosity. He opened his mouth, but no answer came. The words that would explain it felt too dangerous, too soon. They just stood there, inches apart, the old photo between them like a thin sheet of glass. For a long moment neither moved. Her arms lowered slowly, her fingers brushing the sideboard as if to ground herself. His hands flexed once, empty. Their eyes held, not defiance now, but a fragile, mutual ache neither of them had named aloud. The apartment seemed to dim around them. Even the city noise outside felt far away, muted by the weight of what they weren't say. Two people suspended between past and present, between retreat and something they both knew would change everything. They stayed frozen like that, balanced on the edge of confession, the photograph's younger smile staring out between them. The balcony jutted over the city like a small ship's deck. Midnight wind swept the curtains inward, carrying the smell of rain on asphalt and a faint hum of traffic far below. Strings of muted streetlights stretched into the distance like dotted lines leading nowhere. She stood at the railing with her back to him, one hand resting on the cold iron. Her coat hung open over a slip of silk. From inside, a faint song played on a low radio, but out here there was only the breeze. Leo stepped through the open doors, coffee forgotten somewhere behind him. You'll get cold, he said softly. She glanced over her shoulder. I like the air. It clears my head. Her hair moved across her cheek. She tucked it behind her ear with a small, distracted motion. He joined her at the railing, leaving just enough space so it didn't feel like a move. Below, headlights curved through wet streets, a slow pulse of red and white. He gripped the metal bar, fingers tight, trying to steady himself against what he had decided on the way here. I tried not to come tonight, he said, voice low but steady. But I couldn't stay away. She didn't look at him. Why? The question floated out with her breath, visible in the cool air. He exhaled, watching his own breath drift. Because I can't stop thinking of you. The words landed between them like a dropped key. All day, every time, even when I tell myself to stop. Her hand tightened on the railing. She kept her eyes on the street, but he could see the pulse at her throat. For a moment she said nothing, only drew a slow breath as if measuring the distance between them. You shouldn't, she murmured finally. Her voice wasn't sharp, it trembled around the edges. We shouldn't. I know, he said. But knowing do. Stop it. She turned then, halfway, enough for him to see her face in the spill of city light. There was no scorn there, only a struggle she wasn't hiding fast enough. You're making this harder, she whispered. I don't want to make it harder. He trailed off, unable to finish. His hands left the railing and hovered at his sides, useless. For a heartbeat they stared at each other, the noise of the city swelling up like a tide. Every glance, every small touch of the past weeks flickered in his mind. The scarf, the coffee, the photograph, and he thought he saw the same flicker pass through her eyes. She took a step closer, then stopped. Her breath caught audibly in the cool air. Her fingers lifted as if to reach for him, then curled back against her palm. He didn't move. The night pressed in, holding its breath with them. And then she leaned in. Only slightly, a shift of weight, enough to blur the space but not close it. The city below kept moving, oblivious, while up here the moment hung, suspended and waiting. Morning filtered in through the sheer curtains, pale gold and lavender across the apartment. The city sounded different at this hour, not the night's hiss and hum, but a soft thrum of delivery trucks and distant birds. The air still smelled faintly of coffee and rain. She sat at the kitchen table in a robe, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. The lines of her face looked gentler in daylight, not younger exactly but softer, like a painting with its edges blurred. Across from her, Leo stood by the counter, jacket on but unzipped, one palm flat on the cool marble. He hadn't said much since waking. Between them was a space full of everything that had happened and everything they hadn't named. The night's electricity had faded into a quiet, but not an emptiness, more like the hush after a storm when you're still deciding whether to go outside. She broke the silence first. You should eat something before you go, she said. The offer sounded like habit, not expectation. He shook his head. I'm not hungry. He kept his eyes on the window, watching the sunlight catch on the balcony rail where they'd stood hours earlier. A minute passed. Then she said, almost to herself, some lines aren't meant to be crossed. Her thumb traced a circle on the mug. But sometimes they already are. He looked at her then. And when they are, her lips curved into the smallest, most tired smile. Then you live with it. And you try to be kind. Leo nodded slowly. He could feel the weight of the room, but also a strange lightness, as if the truth itself had given them a kind of permission, not to continue, but to stop pretending. I don't regret last night, he said quietly. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. I don't either. A pause. But we can't pretend it didn't change us. He wanted to argue, to promise something, but the words dissolved before he could form them. Instead, he walked to the table, set his hand on the back of the chair beside hers, and said simply, thank you for trusting me. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. Take care of yourself, she murmured. He straightened, slipped his hands into his pockets, and moved toward the door. The light fell across his face, making him squint. He hesitated at the threshold, not from indecision now, but from knowing he'd remember this scene longer than he should. She didn't follow. She just watched him go, one hand resting on the mug, sunlight painting her fingers in soft gold. He reached the hallway and glanced back once, catching her silhouette against the pastel morning. Neither of them spoke. The camera would fade here, but a question would linger in the air, heavier than the silence they'd shared. Would you have walked away or stayed? Final takeaway. Love and connection are not perfect or immediate. They require risk, honesty, and the courage to step beyond fear. Even fleeting brushes, whispered words, and fragile moments can leave an indelible mark. Did you enjoy this story? What kinds of emotionally charged, slow burn stories would you like to hear next?